Today, we're doing a forensic analysis of a single, powerful verse from the Qur'an. We're going to go way beyond a simple reading to really unpack its intricate layers. Think of it like retreating the source text as our primary document to uncover the detailed spiritual blueprint it provides for reaching what it calls the ultimate abode. So, this is it. This is the verse that's going to be our entire focus. Surah Ar-Ra'd, verse 22. And you'll notice it doesn't just list some vague virtues. No, it paints a complete portrait of a very specific group of people, the people of understanding. It does this by laying out 4 foundational characteristics that, when you put them all together, lead to a very specific and ultimate destination. All right, here's our roadmap for this analysis. First, we'll look at the verse as a whole, just to get the structure down. Then, we're going to do a deep dive into the 3 virtues that the source exegesis really unpacks in detail: the profound realms of patience, the big picture philosophy of spending, and that active principle of repelling evil. Then we'll tie it all together to see the hierarchy they create and the final promise they hold. Okay, before we break it all down piece by piece, let's just take a moment to look at the full portrait the verse paints. It lays out this really precise sequence of, internal states, external actions, and guiding intentions that all come together to define the character of the truly virtuous. So the verse gives us 4 pillars. First, patience, and this is key, with a very specific motivation. Second, establishing prayer, which is that foundational link to the divine. Third, spending from what God has given. And fourth, this dynamic moral principle of countering bad with good. Now, while prayer is obviously a central pillar of faith, the particular exegesis we're drawn from today zooms in with incredible detail on the other 3. So for our purposes, we're going to concentrate on the source's in-depth analysis of patience, spending, and repelling evil. Let's start with the very first characteristic mentioned, which the source presents as the absolute foundation for everything else: sabr, or patience. And let me tell you, this isn't just about passively enduring or, waiting quietly. The text we're analyzing shows us that it's a really profound and multifaceted spiritual station. Our entire analysis is drawn directly from this meticulous exegesis. And it's really telling, isn't it? The text itself dedicates its opening analysis to deconstructing this very first quality: patience. It's treated like the bedrock, the foundation upon which all the other virtues have to be built. It's that inner strength you need before any real meaningful action can happen on the outside. The verse itself actually hands us the key. This isn't just any old patience. It's qualified with the phrase, ibtigha'a wajhi rabbihim, seeking the countenance of their Lord. This changes everything. The motivation is the whole point. According to the exegesis, this little phrase lifts the act from just being a coping mechanism or some kind of stoic resilience into a profound, intentional act of worship. The why you are patient is so much more important than the what you are patient with. Now this is where it gets really interesting. The source makes this critical distinction. It separates sabr lillah, patience for God, from sabr billah, patience by God's strength. Being patient billah means you're asking for His help to get through something, often with a reward in mind, like getting into heaven. And that's essential, for sure. But being patient lillah, for God, means God Himself is the goal. The act isn't transactional anymore. It's an act of pure devotion, driven by love and awe, no matter the outcome. And the source argues that this is a far, far superior spiritual station. This is for the elect. So that distinction naturally leads us to a huge question that the text makes us confront. Is the patience it takes to get through a personal tragedy the same, spiritually, as the patience it takes to get up for morning prayers every single day? Or the patience needed to constantly turn away from something tempting but forbidden? Well, according to this exegesis, the answer is a clear and definite no. The text actually breaks down the practical application of patience into these 3 distinct arenas. First, you've got patience in obedience. That's the proactive endurance you need to fulfill your religious duties, which can be tough or tedious. Second is patience against sin. That's the active self-control to resist temptation. And third is patience in adversity. This is what we usually think of, enduring misfortunes and disasters that are mostly out of our hands. And the source presents a clear hierarchy, a ranking for these 3 arenas. It cites a narration that spells it out. While enduring a calamity is good and has a huge reward, actively stopping yourself from a forbidden pleasure is even better, because it's a choice, an act of will. But at the very top, the highest, most valued form of patience is the steadfast endurance it takes to fulfill God's commands, day in and day out. It's that proactive, consistent, and voluntary struggle that holds the greatest spiritual weight. Okay, let's keep building on this. After establishing that internal fortitude of patience, the verse points to a major external action that flows right from it: spending from what God has provided, or infaq. So the text is really clear that infaq is not just about giving money. The Quranic phrase, out of what we have provided for them, is deliberately broad. The source explains this provision includes your time, sharing specialized knowledge, using your social standing or authority to help someone who doesn't have a voice, or using your skills for the community's benefit. The whole principle is about putting every blessing God has given you back into circulation for the greater good. Now, the verse specifically mentions spending both secretly and openly, and the exegesis dives into the wisdom behind each one. Spending in secret is often seen as superior because it's the ultimate protection for your intention, right? It guards the act from any taint of pride or wanting to be praised, and crucially, it protects the dignity of the person receiving it. But the text clarifies that spending openly can also be highly praiseworthy if the only reason you're doing it is to set a good example and encourage a culture of generosity, especially when it comes to voluntary, non-obligatory giving. This brings us to another critical point the source material raises. If a person is spending for a good cause, does it matter where that money or that time or that influence came from? To put it bluntly, can you perform a good deed with a tainted instrument? And the answer from the text is definitive. There is an absolute prerequisite. The exegesis hammers home the point that the moral purity of the asset itself is non-negotiable. It grounds this in the theological principle that God is pure, tayyib, and so he only accepts that which is pure. That means giving charity from wealth that was earned through unethical or forbidden means isn't considered a virtuous act at all. The foundation of the deed has to be clean for it to have any spiritual value. Let's move to the third characteristic. This one is maybe the most dynamic and socially transformative, and they repel evil with good. A key insight here comes from the Arabic verb used, yadribuna. It implies an active, forceful pushing back, or repelling. The source stresses that this is the total opposite of passive forgiveness or just turning a blind eye to wrongdoing. It's an active moral strategy. It's about entering the very space where an evil was committed, whether it was physical, verbal, or social, and deliberately overriding its negative impact with a corresponding and greater good. The exegesis gives us multiple layers of application for this powerful principle. On a personal level, it means meeting an insult not with silence, but with a kind word or a prayer for that person. On a societal level, it means countering corruption not just with condemnation, but with transparent and just systems. And on an internal, spiritual level, it means replacing a destructive habit with a constructive one, or following any personal slip-up with an immediate act of repentance and a good deed to erase its spiritual stain. This brings us to the core philosophy behind this principle. The source puts forward this powerful idea. The most effective response to someone's negativity isn't to hit back, but to focus inward and elevate your own character. Your increased virtue, your heightened integrity, becomes the ultimate answer to their vice. It masterfully turns a negative interaction from something that harms you into a catalyst for your own self-improvement. Okay, let's take a step back and look at the order these virtues are presented in: patience, establishing prayer, spending, and then repelling evil. The source suggests that this specific sequence isn't random at all. It represents a logical and coherent progression of spiritual development. We can see a clear developmental path here. According to the text, it all starts with sabr, the internal foundational resilience. It's the silent, enduring strength. Once that inner fortitude is established, it naturally starts to show up externally through the social act of infaq, spending and giving. Finally, with both internal strength and external generosity locked in, the individual evolves into the most dynamic and engaged state, proactively taking on evil in the world and transforming it into good. It's a journey from inner resilience to outward generosity to proactive moral engagement. So, what is the final result of this comprehensive spiritual journey? The verse concludes with a clear and profound promise for those who successfully embody these qualities. For such, there is the final attainment of the eternal home. What becomes crystal clear is that this verse is not just a list of disconnected good deeds. It is laying out a complete spiritual curriculum, a cohesive, step-by-step methodology for human development. By mastering the internal realm through patience, connecting to the divine through prayer, engaging with society through selfless spending, and actively bettering the world by countering evil with good, one follows a clear and structured path to the promised destination, Uqba Adar, the ultimate goodly abode. And this leaves us with the profound question that ties the entire verse together. The very first quality, patience, was anchored by a specific intention, seeking the countenance of their Lord. This exegesis forces us to consider that this intention isn't just for patience, but is the invisible thread that must run through every single act. So the ultimate contemplative question is this: how does one recalibrate their internal compass so that every action, every moment of patience, every prayer, every dollar spent, every response to negativity is performed not for praise or paradise or personal gain, but purely and singularly for the sake of the divine? That is the essence of the path this verse lays out.